This morning. Looks like we have lots of good agencies here today. And we are going to start our budget hearings this morning with the Department of Audits and Accounts. Mr. Griffin. We're on page 4. Committee.
Good morning. Good morning. All right. Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. So I'm Greg Griffin. I'm your state auditor, and with me today is Carol Schwindy, our director of administration. I want to thank you for the opportunity to meet with you today to talk about our FY16 budget. Before we go into the details, just for the new members on the committee, just how our budget works. We, for budget purposes, we are a considered legislative agency. So the governor has to put into his recommendation what we submit to OPB without any changes. So the request that we have that we're going to discuss in a minute is our request and not the governor's recommendation. Just want to clarify that point. So looking at our tracking sheet, you'll see several line items under most of the programs. The first line item under each one of those programs is our calculation of the statewide effect of the overhead rate for the pension plan. The second line item there is a reallocation or reclassification of funds between programs that we discussed with y'all as part of our FY amended 15. So this is just a carry forward of those reclassifications or reallocations of those amounts from that discussion. And then the last item, which under our first program, Audit and Insurance Services, line item 4.1.3 is our enhancement request to our fiscal year 15 budget that we want to share a little more information with you. Good. All right. So as to our request, we are requesting funding for an additional 9 auditors for our education audit division, which is required by statute to audit each college, university, technical college, school board, and RESA. This requirement translates into approximately 230 education audits each year. Our current staffing levels do not enable us to complete all of those audits within a 12-month period, which we think is a reasonable period of time. These positions will help us more effectively fulfill our statutory requirements. And these 9 positions will move us closer to our staffing levels that have been maintained prior to the recession. How did we get to that number? We completed an internal analysis, and that analysis indicates that we actually need 14 additional positions to complete those audits on an annual basis. We calculated our audit plan, all the audits that we need to do each year, the number of hours, subtracted our available hours from our current staff, and that leaves the additional 14 FTE equivalents. We are taking action internally to address a portion of that shortage. So based on some anticipated efficiencies that we expect to gain through some reorganizations, process improvements, and strategic initiatives that we're working on, we estimate that we'll be able to address the equivalent of 5 FTEs internally. So our shortfall is those 9 positions. So some of the consequences, if we don't complete these audits on a timely basis, we're talking about audits of the school boards that won't be done within a 12-month period after year end. There is a potential loss of federal funds for those entities. I'm not aware that that's occurred, but that is a potential issue. Fraud could go potentially undetected for a greater period of time, as again, those audits are not being done in a timely manner. In some cases, school board management does not have timely, they don't receive timely and reliable financial statement information to make key decisions. Some of the school boards do not have the expertise on staff or the funding to hire consultants to prepare their financial statements throughout the year or on a timely basis. So our audited financial statements are their source of official financial information from which they could make decisions. And then also untimely financial statements could potentially affect their bond ratings and the ability to raise capital through bonds as well. So to sum up, we've calculated a need of about 14 additional FTEs. I think as an agency we should put skin in the game. I think we can come up with cost savings, reduced time efforts, those types of things to cover an equivalent 5 FTEs, and that sort of results in our request for an additional funding for 9 FTEs. With that, I'll ask your request for favorable consideration, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't know I was going to have any questions, but I noticed several things. And so, first of all, they may or may not be applicable to the budget, but it's a curiosity I have on some other issues. So if you want to tell me it's off, we can talk offline or send me someplace else, do that. First of all, if I add these two numbers up, they're just under $500,000 in ERS. Is that total dollars for ERS this year, or is this going to be spread out in other departments? If I understand this, this is basically just staying in compliance on our ERS to make sure there's enough money in there based on the current projected payouts. Is that correct?
I'll try to answer, Carol can correct me, but these are our agency funding requirements that we will need to make to ERS for fiscal year 16.
Only your agency?
Only our agency.
So no way of saying that your agency alone, and how many, what's your full-time equivalent for your agency?
Let's use 275 roughly.
Okay. So for 275 full-time equivalents, we're going to add $500,000, or another way of saying that your retirement is $500,000 short.
Based on their new rates that are set for fiscal year 16.
Okay. In those new rates, would you be able to provide me with a number, and I'll say it this way not to sound derogatory, but how much are we paying people to not work? They've earned a retirement based on what their compensation was. What percentage is your group at? Can you get that number for me?
I understand that question.
Someone's receiving $100,000 a year in retirement benefits because they made $150,000 in their job using whatever formula. I'd like to know a correlation between how much your retirement payout is compared to what they earned. I'm just trying to get to that percentage. Is it 60%? Like, I know we have a variety of retirement proposals out there. We've got TRS, ERS, we've got judicial, we've got all, and I have discovered that there's a lot of variations in those, and I'm just trying to get to get an idea of what your particular agency is.
I think that's probably an offline conversation.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Contribution rates that all the agencies.
Okay, that's fine. I would appreciate if we could get that. The second question has to do with compensation from an audit. Sorry, Madam Chair, can I have this?
Well, we just need Greg to pull the mic closer to his mouth so that it's not streaming very well. Thank you.
I'm doing for something completely different. I'm doing trying to determine state employees' compensation numbers, and I've seen several websites that have one, and someone forwarded me something this week, and it had audits on there. And are y'all responsible for putting that together, or is that somewhere else in state government?
We collect salary information from all across.
There we go. Yes, we collect that salary information from all entities throughout state government and publish that annually in December on our website.
Okay, so give me the location, and I'm assuming since you're the auditors that you're at, because what I found is several websites, there's a variation, it's not consistent, and so I'd like to be able to find out the most reliable information. Where would I go to receive that information?
www.opengeorgia.gov.
Okay, so opengeorgia.gov is yours, that's the information, and is it fair to say that should be the most
It should be.
most accurate?
We collect it and publish it. Just to be full disclosure, we don't audit that.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. And those questions will make me very positive. I'm not trying to be able to thank you.
We'll send you that link.
Any other questions, committee? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, next up is the Government Transparency and Campaign Finance Commission. We have Robert Lane and Bethany Wetzel. Page 5.
Good morning. Ready? Hi, good morning. My name is Bethany Wetzel, and my colleague seated on my left is Robert Lane. We are both attorneys for the Georgia Government Transparency and Campaign Finance Commission, and just want to say thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to be here to discuss our fiscal year 2016 proposed budget. First of all, the mission of the commission is to we're entrusted with protecting the democratic process and ensuring fair elections for the state of Georgia, and making sure that significant private interest of elected officials are disclosed to the public so we can ensure that the public is able to make informed decisions about what interests the candidates or elected officials have in making laws. We do that through ensuring compliance with the Act through education and enforcement. The entirety of our Act is found in Title 21, Chapter 5. Currently, the staff employs 10 employees. We have 2 vacancies. Our staff is comprised of 2 people who provide education and training. There are 2 attorneys, 1 auditor, 4 support staff, and 1 office administrator. Is that 5? Last year, and I'm going to base this off of calendar year 2014 because, as some of you may be aware, in the 2014 session, there was some legislation that removed local filers from filing directly with the commission. So there were some changes in the ways reports and disclosures were filed with the commission. But last year, for calendar year 2014, we had approximately 35,000 reports filed directly with the commission. That means that either we received them directly in the mail, but mainly through e-filing. As part of the legislative change, we still receive the filings from local officials, from your county and municipalities, but those are received by us through e-faxing. And last year, for calendar year 2014, we received approximately 125,000 transmissions. And I emphasize transmissions because in those transmissions, there could be several reports. So we received at least 160,000 reports, disclosures, financial disclosure statements last year. And I highlight this because pursuant to OCGA 2156B8, it is a duty of the commission to inspect every single filing that is filed with us to see if it conforms with the Act. And I mentioned before, we have one auditor, and there's 2 attorneys, and we have 10 employees total, and that's very difficult at this moment, and basically impossible. So when we talk about the budget, you'll see the need and the reason why there's some increased funding for staffing. As you'll see, the proposed budget for fiscal year 2016, our changes that we asked for, is an increase by approximately $1.3 million. Almost $500,000 of that reflects an increase in our insurance premium with DOS. $43,000 of that is to ensure that we can continue to provide the e-fax capabilities to those local filing officers. And then a large bulk of that amount is to increase the staffing of the agency. And I'm going to give Mr. Lane an opportunity to talk about the increase in staffing.
Thank you, Bethany. Thank you, members of the Commission, for having us here this morning. Basically, the complaint process works under the terms of our Act is that cases can open in one of 2 ways. Citizens can file complaints alleging a violation of the Campaign Finance Act, or if through our auditing process staff determines that there has been a violation of the Campaign Finance Act, staff is able to open up a case in an investigation against a person alleged to have violated the Act. When we receive an initial complaint, staff has 48 hours under the terms of the Act to determine whether there is any substance to the complaint. We have to determine whether there is reasonable grounds to continue investigation. And for example, that's generally when someone sends in a complaint that says, I don't like Representative Doe, he was mean to me. Well, that of course isn't a violation of the Campaign Finance Act. We dismiss it and it never sees the light of day. If we do find that there are reasonable grounds for violation, for example, they say Representative Doe received $10,000 from Company X in calendar year 2014, well, that warrants further investigation. Once that is done, notice is provided to the respondent by certified mail. So you'll see our postage budget. The line item might be a little higher than normal, but that's because we have to give certified mail to everyone who is a respondent. We begin the investigative process. That usually requires that we turn over the case to our auditor, at least in an ideal world, so that they can audit all of the filings. The statute of limitations under our Act for a person in a 2-year office is 3 years, and for a person in a 4-year office is 5 years, and that's the maximum statute of limitations we have. So it doesn't increase for our Supreme Court justices and Court of Appeal judges who are there for 6 years. That's still just a 5-year statute. Ideally, the auditor would look back for those 3 or 5 years through every filing they've done to identify not only violations of the Act, but also what are called technical defects. Technical defects under the terms of our Act are, I like to call them accounting errors. It's when someone says 2 + 2 = 6 and it throws off all of their other numbers. Those are not violations of the Act, but we're required to let the filer know your numbers aren't adding up. This is what your numbers should say based on your numbers, so please amend your reports in the following particulars. That's important because with the technical defect notice, a filer has 30 days from the date of that notice to correct their reports. After 30 days, between 31 and 60 days, there's a $50 penalty that goes to each technical defect that's not corrected. And then after 60 days, if the filer, and there have been a number who have fallen under this category, if you still fail to correct your technical defects, then they become violations of the Campaign Finance Act because you are not properly reporting your income, your expenditures, and your donations. Once that stage is completed, staff tries to negotiate a consent order with the respondent, hoping that they will be able to amend their reports, pay the civil penalties that are required under the terms of the Act. If that is not possible and the person insists on that no violation occurred, the case proceeds to what's called a probable cause hearing or a preliminary hearing before the full commission. At that time, the 2 attorneys act as the prosecuting officers, and they present the case to the commission, and if the commission finds that there's probable cause or it's more likely than not a violation of the Act had occurred, by a majority vote, they can refer the case to the Attorney General's office for further prosecution under the Administrative Procedures Act, and then that's more like a full hearing that you'd have in front of the Office of State Administrative Hearings. So I know that's a lot of information, but that's kind of our complaint process in a nutshell with Cliff Notes. Sorry. Yes, ma'am. No, Ideally, we would like for staffing levels, and that's one of the main reasons for the request, and it's over half the request is for staffing levels. In an ideal world, you would have an auditor for each attorney, because unfortunately we've noticed there's a bottleneck with Ms. Wetzel and I using the same auditor. We're actually at a point now where Ms. Wetzel and I are having to do audits ourselves instead of just concentrating on the legal aspect of the case because our auditor is backlogged. Additionally, our commission, as of December 10th, has started instituting random audits because we don't have the staffing level to do full audits of everyone who files. So in an attempt to make enforcement a little more fair and even-handed across the board, they gave an initial level of 5% for auditing. We just got the list of filers for auditing, and out of 14,141 total filers, 5% was 1,382 people that need auditing by our one auditor. I'm afraid she might have a mild heart attack when I show her the list. So it would be an ideal world to have one auditor per trial team. Additionally, we have one paralegal, and unfortunately that paralegal does a number of administrative duties in addition to being a paralegal currently. So ideally we'd look for another paralegal to join a trial team. Aside from that, the additional positions would be basically to fund auditor positions to ensure that the auditing process could commence and that we would be able to carry out our statutory duty of auditing, if not all filers, at least more than the 5% that we're currently stuck at. And with that, I'll see if anyone has any questions.
I do have a few questions. Chairman Pruitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
It was 24. Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning. I've got a couple of questions. One is that you only have 10 employees at the current time.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
What, $458,946 insurance adjustment for 10 people?
Yes, sir. If you're familiar with the amount of lawsuits that were filed last year, and then also some pending litigation currently, that increase is due to reflect the payouts from last year, and this year that's what our premium is now, as set by the Department of Administrative Services.
Yes, sir. It's not a health insurance premium. It's a liability insurance.
Well, yeah, I can see that now because that was what was throwing me off. I thought, you got to be kidding me, but okay. All right. The second thing is, Madam Chair, I got two quick more questions if you don't mind. So you're looking at wanting to almost double your staff. How long have you been operating with 10 staff members?
Unfortunately, the commission had very high turnover rates. In fact, we're not at full staffing levels. As I'm sure the commission knows, we are absent an executive director that job is posted, and we're hoping to fill that by March or April of this year. At least that's the commission's self-imposed deadline to fill it. Additionally, another clerk is no longer with the commission as well. So I believe while we have 10 positions open, I think we're currently staffed at 8. We have 12, we're currently staffed at 10.
But the question is, how long have you been operating with 10 people?
I believe we've been operating at 10 people for the last 2 years. Unfortunately, Robert and I are both at a disadvantage in that we started with the commission on July 1st. And because there's been so much turnover, there's not a lot of historical knowledge as far as the former employees. But I do not believe that the commission has ever had more than 15 employees at once. I think it's hovered around 10 to 15.
But has your load increased? I mean, we have the same amount of auditing that we've always had, do we not?
Which they were never auditing the reports. There have never been random audits done. The statutory duty imposed by the Campaign Finance Act has never been addressed. There were never random audits done. And then also, when Robert and I joined the commission in July, there was a backlog of 183 open cases. And that's what we're currently working on right now. And although we have resolved, at our last commission meeting, we resolved 40 cases, because we continue to receive complaints, our numbers right now are at 163 open cases. So has our workload increased? Not necessarily. However, I don't think the workload was ever fully completed.
Okay, I understand. And one more quick question, Madam Chair.
Sure.
When you collect a fine, where does that money go?
It's bifurcated. If it is a civil penalty, the entire amount of the civil penalty is remitted to the state treasury and goes into the general operating fund. If it is a late fee, the first $25 of each late fee that is imposed is retained by the commission as retained revenue under the terms of the act. The balance of the late fee is then transferred to the state treasury to the general operating fund. As far as lobbying registration fees under the terms of the act, the lobbying registration fees are retained by the commission as retained revenue.
Do we have a figure for that anywhere? For those two items individually?
Yes, sir. As of our December 10th meeting, and I don't believe these numbers have drastically changed, total collected funds to date were $56,876 and some change. Total remitted to the state treasury general operating fund was $47,405, with total retained revenue for the commission being $9,471 and some change.
Okay, what can we do to reduce that insurance premium? What causes it to jump like that? I mean, what, I haven't.
The insurance premium is reflective of the amount of payouts. I believe last year the payouts approached about $3 million. There is currently one pending lawsuit against the commission. I think the only way that premium will drop is for no further lawsuits to continue coming. And I think the commission is now functioning at a level that I don't foresee that being an issue anytime soon with additional lawsuits coming. The current lawsuit that's pending is from a person who previously filed a lawsuit. They're now coming back.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Representative Barr.
First of all, thank y'all. I'm sure this is tough coming into it new, and as all the things that have happened at the commission, I really appreciate y'all sharing with us, and actually Chairman Pruitt asked some of the questions, so thank you.
Chairman Reinders.
Thank you so much, and we met recently in my office. What was that 14,000 figure again?
The retained revenue, sir?
Pardon me?
The retained revenue? Is that
No, sir. I think you'd referenced how many cases you had out there.
Oh, yes, sir. As of July 1, 2014, there were 183 cases that we had in-house. As of the December meeting, it was 193. When you remove the cases that were closed at that meeting, it's dropped to 164.
Okay.
As of current.
Let me rephrase then. I apologize.
Sorry.
How many different filers or over time, or it could be one filer, but they you for 5 times.
Correct.
Those cases that I think you referenced.
The total filers, or the number of people who are required to file reports with our commission, is 14,141 people who are under a duty to file their reports with the commission.
Okay.
That's including state officials, local officials, because although local officials file with their local official, the local official then electronically files with the commission, and the commission is responsible for enforcement.
Thank you, Madam, if I may go down this path. And of those 14,000 that are supposed to file, what percentage do you have, or what number do you have that currently you feel are audit worthy? Because you had made the statement at the biennial that you're going to start with individuals who, so I'm trying to get a hard number on that 14,000. What percentage do you feel are in some form of violation, whether disputed or not?
I would assume, and this is, and you'll have to forgive me, sir, quite a high substantial number, because the commission's first directive with the 5% auditing was to begin with persons who have outstanding late fees who fail to file. 5% of just the outstanding late fee persons was 1,382 people. And given that, when you extrapolate outwards, I would say it's in the high 60 to 75% range of people who
I
have.
say, so it's your testimony that 60 to 70% of the people of the 14,000 in the state that are supposed to file, 60 to 70% of them,
Yes, sir.
finish that sentence for me,
Would have outstanding late fees, failure to file, filed late, which all constitute violations of the Campaign Finance Act.
And you've also talked to me before that at the end of the day that you have tried to work with them and has actually changed some policy as it relates to what perhaps may be forgiveness. I remember three. Help me explain that if you would.
Yes, sir. The commission realized with a number of changes within the law that occurred between 2011 through 2014, that a number of local officials who are the bulk of the people who are audited were having troubles not knowing where to file, who to file with, what forms to file. So the commission instituted a policy on its April 20th, 2012 meeting, which stated that for each campaign contribution disclosure report and for each personal financial disclosure statement that was required to be filed between 2011 and April 20th of 2012, only one fine of $125 would be imposed for any campaign contribution disclosure report that was supposed to be filed. So if you miss 7 of them, that's okay. You only get a $125 fee as opposed to 125 times 7. And as far as the personal financial disclosure statement, you'd only have a $125 fee instead of a $250 fee.
So again, help me understand this. I just want the committee to understand how many people out there could have been removed of your 60 or 70% of 14,000. What percentage of them could have been eliminated from your rolls by simply paying their $125?
I would have to say it would probably, if the current audits we've done for GMA, because I think we've done about 120 for local filing officials, of those, it was about 40% would have fallen under they would only have one fee if you followed that matrix. You do have some additionally that have other violations going beyond 2012, where they fall outside of the commission's order, that they don't fall under that one.
Okay, so and again, we're looking at some potential legislation as we move forward, so why I need this. So your testimony today is 60 to 70% of the 14,000 owe some kind of fee. 40% of that number would be $125.
Depending on where their actual violations occurred. If it was only through 2011 through 2012, it would be $125.
Okay, what percentage then? Let's go back. Do you feel not comfortable with the 40% number?
No, I mean, I can get you actually harder numbers.
Great, I'd look forward to that. Of the 40% then that could have 125 or less, what percentage actually paid it and took it off your books?
Out of the 120 that were audited, I think 33 were the ones that actually paid it.
And what is yours, if I said to you, what do you think the reason is, as opposed to being hit with, like you said, 5 times 125 or 7 times 125? If I said, what's your best judgment on why they refuse to pay just $125? What do you hear why they refuse to just pay $125 to clean the whole thing up?
This is not statistical evidence. It's circumstantial. From the persons I have talked to, the anecdotal evidence is, we're going to wait to see if the law changes. We'll get back to you. That tends to be what they say. When I ask them to elaborate, they don't really want to elaborate. So.
Mr. Hamilton knows exactly what we're talking about. Thank you. And I'm almost done with this, but this is important. At the end of the day, how much money, given your generosity of cutting back from 125 7 times or 5 times to just 125, how much money are we talking about at the end of the day this is costing you or costing the state from people who are just hoping the law changes because 40% of them never did what they were supposed to do? I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
60 to 70% never did what they were supposed to do.
Since we have to give out certified mail notice, it's $7 per person every time we send out the certified mail notice, so that's a guaranteed expense. as far as the amount of lost time and the inability to carry out our other statutory duties like reviewing for technical defects, actually processing the old backlog. It'd be hard for me to come up with an exact dollar figure, but it is quite substantial. I know when the original issue arose with the people failing to pay their late fees, for the better part of October and half of November, we were constantly hand auditing accounts to determine how many of the fees we could knock off to get down to 125. And then once we provide that notice, we still were met with, oh well, thank you for sending us the notice.
And finally, Madam Chair, I just want to say with this, with what the committee's learned and the public has learned is that we need to come up with a mechanism, and I think we're in agreement that if we try to do our best to clear this up, we don't need them chasing at $7 a clip, $125 fees. We've talked about that. Yeah. There's bigger fish to fry here. But what do we do in the future to keep people from just turning around and going, well, let me see if the law will change again because I just frankly want to ignore the law? Mm-hmm. Was that not a concern of y'all's?
Yes, sir, it is.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You wave. Okay. No more questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
And our next agency is the Department of Driver Services. Page 9, members. Thank you. Good morning.
Morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for having us this morning. Made a little short PowerPoint just to hopefully maybe the words will the pictures will be better than 1,000 words from me. With your blessing, I would skip to 2.2.4 if that's okay to get to the real substance of some additions to our budget. And 2.2.4 is for a CDL pad. Sorry. 20.2.4 is for the CDL pad in West Georgia. This would be that what we would like to do here is add a pad to the new facility that's being built in Paulding County. We have a pretty strong need right now for the ability to do more CDL testing, and we've been working much more closely with the CDL community than I feel like we have in the last few years. But namely, we have 2 CDL driving schools that are in this part of the state. One's in Paulding, one's in Lithonia Springs, Lithia Springs, and the other is in Austell. Those schools, just as an example, drive to Dalton most often, which is an 80-mile drive. In some cases, they do drive down to Jackson. To help accommodate these schools for quite a long time, we have given them reserved slots so that they don't have to worry about not being able to get a slot. But if you look at my little bitty map there, you can sort of see in that area of the state we are lacking. And we know that with the deepening of the ports down in Savannah, increased jobs coming to Georgia, we see this demand going up and up, and the driving schools have shared with us different information about their growth. There's a lineman school up in Dade County, up in Dalton. They train people for the repairing the telephone poles and all that from across the country. They come up there to get trained. Part of that training, which makes it extremely unique, is when the graduates leave, they leave with a CDL. So bottom line is we have a lot of demand, and we're looking to increase our resources to meet that demand. So I'll move on to Fayetteville, Madam Chair. In the Fayetteville office, that picture shows you quite a few folks standing outside. And just for clarity, that there's a big brick structure in the photo, and we do not have any of our services in the top of that. We're on the bottom. We have somewhere around 4,500 square feet, which only gives us room in this building for about 35 or so lobby chairs and 4 counters. So you can see on my chart at the bottom for the volume that we have there. Traditionally, we would have anywhere from 7 to 12 counters, as opposed to the 4 that we have. And bottom line is, we just completely struggle in that area. We had a center down in Union City, in Shannon Mall, that closed in 2010. And between that and just growth, we have overwhelmed this facility, and we are looking to move out of there to something that's more able to meet the demand in that area. I did put a public comment from the Yelp on there, and just because I felt like it kind of did a good job of summarizing what we experience on a broader basis. If I may, I'll move to 20.2.6. This is for Paulding County. This is to increase or to create the staff that is there. Last year's budget included an ad in the bond package for a new building there. We've been working closely with Paulding County. Got a little bitty baby picture of the how the facility is expected to look when it's completed. We hope to have that done sometime well before the end of the year, but late in the year. And this facility is designed to have 16 counters, and in order to meet the demand we're anticipating there, we're looking to add 16 full-time positions and 8 part-time. I would point out in my little notes there, you can see Paulding County is the 13th most populous county in Georgia. The top 12 have a DDS office already. Right after Paulding is Douglas, which is next door. They don't have a presence, so we're also expecting that this office will cover some of the demand from that area as well. Currently, our folks from Paulding go to Carrollton, North Cobb, Marietta, Cartersville, even to Cedartown, and those are places that we already struggle as well a little bit. So if we can pull that volume closer to home for those folks, we believe actually will have a broader impact for the whole state. I'll move on to 20.2.6. It also has Cobb County. I have pictures of these 2 buildings here. This is not for buildings. This is exclusively for personal services. But I have the buildings there just so you can get an idea of how far they're coming with progress. These are the 5th and 4th busiest CSCs we have in the state. They both do about 144,000 transactions. We were looking to, so we already have a presence in Cobb, but we're short on meeting the demand there as well. So what this is designed to do is help supplement that staff. We're not asking for the one-time money in this because we expect to be able to move, by and large, everything we have in the current centers into the new ones so that we don't need to double up that expense. But the new ones will, they're designed to meet our workflow and our business, so we expect that to have a tremendous impact on how we're doing there. I'll keep going to 20.2.7. 22.2.7 is to help us increase the base salary for the field office positions. On that first chart, you can see that currently for a driver examiner, a brand new person starting, we're barely over the pay grade minimum. This would be a 10 or 11% increase to the pay grade minimum. After someone has been with us for 2 years and proven that they can do the job, they can become a driver examiner 2, and it would become a 10% increase there as well. Now for driver examiner 2, this is not an across-the-board raise. This is designed to be an increase of the minimum starting pay. And so for driver examiner 2, this formula actually recognizes that we have 50 people in that position today who are already above that floor, so they would not be impacted. And we're good with that. I mean, there may be some small compression complaint from somewhere across our folks, but this is, if we can bring this 10% increase to these folks, we're going to be in great shape. It's going to make a dramatic influence on what we're able to accomplish, bringing down our turnover. Our training cost per person is somewhere around $4,700 for those frontline folks. Right now, their tenure is about 1 to 2 years. It's just an area where we struggle dramatically. And I realize pay is not the only thing that people consider when they're taking a job. But my bottom chart shows you a little bit of competitive salaries. And I start around the state of Georgia, and these are just from articles that have been in the newspaper. kind of giving an idea of unskilled labor, and I would argue that our folks deal in skilled labor, homeland security, as we talk about, all kinds of topics. Those are the folks who are looking at the documents on the front end, making a lot of determinations of who's entitled to a driver's license and who is not. So moving along for the managers, we have 20 that are above the floor. So again, this is not an across-the-board pay increase. And for the district managers, 3 are above that floor. And I would also just emphasize, as we're competing with some of these other occupations that I've listed there, another difference that's very unique to us is we do a background check. We do driving, criminal, and credit. And so for us to find folks who will take this job and that we can keep in this job is a significant challenge. And all that background check is extremely important. We hear about data breaches all the day, and these folks every day are seeing all of our personal information. So we are definitely looking forward to the opportunity, if we can, to increase lower our turnover. I just included a couple of photos. This is one I took at QT of a poster they had on the next page. And then these are regular advertisements by Aldi in the Sunday paper. Our salaries don't get up to these numbers. Frankly, it doesn't bother me. What it does do is it gets us to a point where we can get some people to come have a conversation with us and then see if we can't bring them in. I do think there's a lot of it's honorable and noble what we do, and a lot of people are attracted to public service, and this gets them into the door with us to see if they can meet our background requirements. The next page in my PowerPoint, just because it is kind of a unique job, there are a lot of things that someone that Aldi or QT or anyone else wouldn't have to think about. One of them is getting a car with strangers, getting in cars that you've never seen before and probably wouldn't want to get into, and with novice drivers. These are just some of the accidents that our folks have been in as a passenger. That dump truck on there actually ran into the car in the picture that it's touching. And the other picture is just an example of one of the many documents our folks have to recognize, know how to determine whether or not they're fraudulent. And so just trying to help paint the picture of what this job involves. The Aldi folks and Publix and everyone else, those folks use they're on a cash register. Our folks are on a computer. They're toggling between screens. Our folks have to deal with point of sale. They have to balance a cash drawer. So it's a demanding, on-your-feet kind of job, and we're looking to increase our talent pool. That salary has not been touched since 2002, and the job has changed dramatically since that time. 2.2.8 is for Sandy Springs, which we talked about in the amended, so I'm more than happy to talk about it again, but I wasn't going to really go into a lot of explanation on that one, unless you would like for me to.
You ready for your question? All right, we do have a question. Chairman Pruitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank y'all for coming today, and I have to applaud you. You guys always do a great job. But I've got a question. Is there a possibility, how many technical colleges do we have around Georgia that are teaching CDL?
I can't name that off the top of my head.
But there's a lot of them.
There are, and they are teaching, and they are helping us with the demand. And
well, can you not work out a deal with them rather than do this new pad or whatever, work out a deal with them to where they can actually do the testing for the driver's license and keep you from having to take on all that load when they already have all the facilities and everything?
We have worked with them, and they have their own issues. I know one of them is, and help me with this, but one of them is that their testers who do this are part-time employees, and they can only work up to 29 hours, for example. And there are, I believe, I'm speaking generally not about a specific technical college location, but they're already maxed out with what they can do, because we do, in high-demand areas, we do talk to them and say, hey, is this something where we could get something done and work together? But
I really would like for you to take time to talk to our new commissioner over there. And have you talked to our new commissioner?
She and I are friends and have been for a while. Right. And I've talked to the previous commissioner. I briefly had an opportunity to speak with her, but I think just since she's come on board, we've both been busy and hadn't gotten into the details, but we have had a conversation about planning to get into the details.
Well, it seems like we just adding a lot of expense when we may have another way to do it without creating all this expense is the main thought I had. In this place that you're building, where you talked about then, I think it's 20.2.6, I believe that's, yeah. How much of the volume there is CDL?
20.2.6.
I think that's the one, yeah, Paulding. Is that where you've just got an overload of more people than you know what to do with, and you?
It is, and that's where we have the gap where we don't have CDL testing that we can do. And I believe also...
So we're spending this money to actually help with the CDL problem?
Yes, sir, to meet that demand, because we have a lot of, especially with those two driving schools on that side of the state and near that area, that's a place we feel like if we can get our testing there, then we can also not only meet that demand, but also relieve some of the burden on the locations where those folks go.
I may be totally wrong, but I just believe for that kind of money, we could work out something a whole lot less working with the technical colleges. But again, I don't know their situation.
Yes, sir. I mean, they do have, in some places they have a CDL pad. They don't have them everywhere, but they have their own demand, and then the competing demand. If we go to, let's say that they do have a lot, because we try to look at this at a different location in North Georgia. If they have a spot that we even could go to, then we end up needing some kind of building or structure there for our folks to be able to go to and get to their computers and all their training. So I know I'm answering you generally, and we'll be glad to go in and get more details, but I guess I do just want to communicate to you that we agree with the thought process, and we've tried to go down that avenue.
Is there any legal reason that you cannot allow someone at the school to be certified to actually do the testing so you don't have to have people on site?
No, sir, there's not a legal problem. The schools are able to test. They are, but they have their demand that they're trying to meet as well.
I understand. I just wondered if that was an issue, because you said you had to have people, a little building and a place to have your people on site. I don't know why you would need that if you actually sort of subcontracted this out to the technical colleges.
Well, again, they have to do their thing, and then they're training the people that go through their coursework.
Right.
And we're training the general public who may not need to take the class or who have taken the class from a driving school.
I understand, but anyway, I think you've answered my question. You talked to them, and you just don't feel that there's an opening there for them to take on this workload to prevent us from having to spend tax dollars to build this new facility and pads and things like that. You don't think that's an option?
In this particular area, no, sir. And we did try to, when our newer office in LaGrange, I'm going to call that fairly new. That one opened since I've been at Driver Services in the last 8 years. We tried to then look at, hey, is there a way to get on here with LaGrange College? And the name may have changed today. And we couldn't do it. They didn't have a pad. So I don't think we can here. In Dalton, we're trying to engage in that conversation to figure out, hey, what about, since that's where all the, the carpet mills and everything are located there, can we do it up there somehow?
It ought to almost be like getting training when you fly an airplane. And you fly with an instructor, and then you get basically, if you do everything, you get a test, and you're done. But so even with CDLs in the school, if they go through the class and they pass it, that should be sufficient for a license without having to go through a test, really, if they actually pass the course. But I don't know, just an idea.
Yes, sir. We'll definitely continue to explore that.
Pass the course.
You're up.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. You might have answered this, I was out, but what is the rate of increase year after year of the number of people needing driver's license? I mean, what's the trend? I mean, are you going up every year, or is it stable, or is it any way to reduce the number of times citizens have to come into the centers to take tests and renew? I mean, I'm just trying to big picture how to cut down on this cost.
100% on board with you. The volume is through the roof. As you know, we're now the eighth most populous state. So one of the things I try to look at is just expiration dates, because That's completely objective. I know that down to the exact number. And so I'm going to step back 1 second to say we're working very hard to increase our social media and our internet service and making sure as best we can that people know we have those, to try to pull them out of the brick and mortar so we can do as little in brick and mortar as possible. So we're trying to do that as hard as we can. Also with the Real ID Act, when people have to come in that one time to provide all their documents, they couldn't do that online, so that hurt. We lost that ability. But what we are seeing is that started in 2012. Even though we have an 8-year license, 75% of our customers choose a 5-year license. I can't explain that. You do the math, it's the same price. But it makes them come back to see us more often. But, so the 75% who came in 2012 obviously come back to see us in 2017. And in 2017, they will be able to renew online. So that's why we're working now to make sure people know we're doing that. So we're trying to attack it from that angle. But so really from a variety of angles, but we want as few people to come into brick and mortar as possible. But looking at those trends is always a caveat to every explanation. We went from a 4-year to a 5-year minimum license in 04, started in 05. So every 5th year, and we're in the middle of that 5th year now, you see a little bit of drop in volume. So this fiscal year is a little bit of an anomaly. But to give you an idea, in 2013, expiring DLs, I'm going to round if you don't mind, but 1.3 million expired. In 2014, 1.4 million expired. I'm going to skip 2015 because it's an anomaly. In 2016, you jumped to 1.6. In 2017, you jumped to just under 1.7. What we've seen traditionally, in addition to that, with all of our other services, is we have somewhere around a 6% annual growth. So just to pick 2 years, in 2014 we did almost 3.8 million total transactions. If you use those assumptions I just gave you, in 2017 we're looking at 4.6 million transactions. So we have got to do everything we can to get people to do what they need to do with us online wherever possible. But with that amount of growth, they're also going to hit us in brick and mortar, and we're trying to anticipate that and work through it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. No more questions.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
Gima, Mr. Butterworth. Page 12. Oh, the many things I could say right now.
Morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing very well. Thank you for
Good.
asking.
We certainly appreciate the time this morning. Thank you all for your service, for being away from your families, for making government work the way that it's supposed to. And on Lincoln's birthday, it's important, as we talk about our budget, to remember one of the quotes that he had, which was, if he had 6 hours to chop down a tree, he'd take the first 4 to sharpen the knife. So that's what we want to do and talk about our budget a little bit today, and explain to you what we're facing, what we're asking, what has been proposed in the governor's budget. Seporia is our financial expert. I will very quickly but deftly defer to her for the difficult questions. But I'll run through what we have, and in HB 76, it's on page 46. I'm not sure what your page is, but it's...
We're on page 12.
Okay, page 12, section 26, subsections 26.6, and point 1, the first line is 19,477 statewide adjustment for increase in employer share of the employee's retirement system, something you all see commonly. 26.6.22, or 14,544 increase for merit-based pay increases. The 1% state funds expended annually for personal service expenditures. Important to note there that our agency is about 82% federally funded. So just a side note there, 26.6.3 reflects a reduction in our insurance premiums paid to DOAS across agencies. That's basically, as you know, statewide adjustment. 26.6.4, And as you can tell, I'm moving quickly to that number because I do want to talk through those and definitely open to any questions you have, especially on this section. $304,000 increase to cover personal service expenditures for additional positions recommended by the Winter Weather Task Force. A total of 23 recommendations. One of those, recommendation 5 actually, it was a staff meteorologist. The breakdown there, $43,500 for the salary plus $26,000 for the fringe benefits. He was actually hired last May and is doing an incredible job and has been contributing to the team effort since my arrival and very expertly. He is a Georgia Tech graduate, but we are getting past that since I'm a University of Georgia graduate, and we're working well together. I'm happy to report to you. Intel analyst, and we can definitely talk through that, and I can give you the information that you might, it's basically for situational awareness. If a county calls us and says they have an issue and the level of a river that is typically reported is normally at 1,200 feet, but right now it's at 1,282 feet. This Intel analyst, this operations Intel analyst would say that's 1 foot below flood stage and would help us sort of decipher through some of that. And the other point there would be that person would all the time be within arm's reach, and that's something that has been a little bit of a disadvantage not having that in the past. The attorney addition there, $96,000 with fringes. Those are any number of different things to work through our budget. We have a number of different fund sources, and Sephora could quote the exact number, but it's in the range of 50 or so different inputs of fiscal resources that come in. Presidential declarations, FEMA appeals, sometimes in the case of an emergency declaration, whether it's state or federal, those payouts could go on for 10 years after the actual event, so it's important for us to have an attorney on the staff. So that number comes to $261,500. The other $42,500 is actually for an additional position in our operations division to help, quite frankly, with the winter weather and monitoring any possible winter weather that could be inbound. And we will, as we transition past the winter weather, it would also be for a severe weather monitor as well. So we definitely want to bolster that side of the house. Then you'll see 26.6.5, 62,198, continuation of an AFY 15 increase for annualized amount for projected personal service expenditures. And quite frankly, that's a change in agency leadership, and happy to discuss that. A couple of notes. We receive state funds annually in the amount, as you can see at the top of the page, $2.1 million, and that's compared to our operating costs of about $11.9 million. That goes back to the earlier number that I mentioned, the percentage number that I mentioned. In FY08, GEMA Homeland Security, the state appropriations were $2.5 million, and the point being there that we are now back, interesting to me more than anything else, we're now back at our 2008 level where we have been before. So this is not anything, this is not an historic request for any type of increase in what has historically been our funds. And then last note, the GEMA federal funds are about $111 million, 55 fund sources total. I said 50 earlier. And most of those are in grants, and quite frankly, most of them go to local communities, municipalities, counties. We are, in many respects, a flow-through to support a lot of the local folks. So those are my comments, and happy to answer any specific questions that you might have.
Any questions? No, not quite.
Hey,
Representative
thank
Dickey.
you, Madam Chair. Did I hear you say that these would put you back to 2008 funding levels?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware of any other state agencies that are being put back to 2008 levels?
I'm not monitoring that.
Oh, okay.
But I'm happy to check that, Representative.
Also, you said you've got a meteorologist on
Yes, sir.
staff. Are you aware if the state that has any other agencies have meteorologists on staff that is it just for your agency, or do you share it with any other departments?
We share a lot of the information that he gathers with DOT, with the State Patrol, and a lot of other agencies that we would be partnering with should the event necessitate. But as far as other meteorologists that are available, having been involved with the severe winter weather last year, that was one of the things that we figured out, was that there are state meteorologists, professors at the University of Georgia and a couple of other places, but their role is not necessarily to monitor current weather situations and what the impact might be. So Will Langston actually sits right outside my office, and we converse quite a bit about weather. And having some of my background in aviation, I'm interested in weather, but also having some of the background that we've had in the last 12 months, we're all interested in the weather as well. So as far as I know, he's the one that has most of the input on what the weather might be.
Representative Barr.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And my question revolves around that as well. So we have a meteorologist, and then, did I understand correctly, we're as well going to a severe weather person? Did you mention that, or did I misunderstand?
One and the same.
Okay, it's the same person.
It is more or less. He will monitor all of that. We also, the other ops person that we have will, the meteorologist is watching the weather. The operations person is basically putting the wheels in motion, communicating with anything from superintendents to local EMA directors to local folks back in the district. And so it's kind of the meteorologist is continuing to work in his world, and then it transitions into the operations, the emergency management world, and that's
perfect. Okay, that was my question.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that question. Sorry for the confusion.
And one more, if I may. And what was the total number of folks that y'all are looking to expand by?
4.
4, okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question.
Now, you mentioned this winter weather monitor.
Right.
Is that a temporary position?
No, ma'am. And that's why I said it, and I probably moved through that too quickly. It is a winter weather person specifically. However, as we transition past winter weather, that person will become the severe weather operations person. So it is, like I just mentioned, he will be as the meteorologist raises the flag and says, looks like we may have some issues, the additional ops person will say, okay, here are the impacted areas, here are the individuals that we need to be communicating with, and he'll basically put the wheels in motion for a fast response.
How many total employees do you have?
107.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you again. Hope you have a great day.
Same to you.
That didn't hurt at all. No, sir, I'm good. This is my...
All right, next up, the Governor's Office of Consumer Protection. Mr. Sowers.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
I brought Sean Conroy with me in case we have any deep questions that I can't answer here. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. I want to tell you a little bit about our recent activities, which I'm very proud of, frankly. As you know, our purpose is to protect the interests of consumers and those of legitimate businesses. I feel we had a pretty good year last year in doing that. The total economic benefit we were able to provide for the citizens in the state of Georgia exceeded $40 million for the first time ever. Some of the highlights of that are as follows. We were able to extract over $7 million in civil penalties. That's a record, which is more than our budget. I don't think we can always do that every year, but I was pleased we were able to do that last year. Our lemon law program reached new heights. 2 years ago, this committee and your counterparts in the other chamber added $100,000 to our budget to allow us to better administer the lemon law. we spent $500,000 a year doing that. Last year, the total of all lemon law awards was in excess of $20 million.
Wow.
Plus, and this is an indication of the recovery of the automobile industry in this state, just in terms of fees submitted with respect to new sales and leases, that number last year increased to just over $900,000, which is a large increase. So that's an indication that the automobile segment of the economy, at least in Georgia, seems to be quite healthy and growing. And I think it vindicates the wisdom of your adding $100,000 to allow us to keep up with that. We had over 900 cases brought to us last year. Curiously, the number of arbitrations that we held did not go up materially. Most of these were settlements, and I don't know why, but anecdotally I feel like perhaps, especially with respect to our domestic producers, they were bending over backwards to try to accommodate people who were bringing complaints because they don't want to continue to lose market share. And so whatever the reason was, the results produced were rather startling. Our section head who runs that part of our agency, which really only involves 5 people, is also the current president of the National Organization of Lemon Law Administrators. So I think we have achieved significant results in that area, significant upgrading in our knowledge, experience, and training, and so forth. And that carried forward into the rest of our activities as well. We have, when everybody is present for duty, 50 full-time employees. 48 of those positions are currently filled, 49th, which will be our 4th intake counselor. And that's a position that's tough to keep filled because it doesn't pay much and it's a high-stress job. Those people spend all day on the phone talking to often irate consumers. That position will be filled next Monday. We've sent out a letter to a candidate yesterday. We had then one more open position, which we believe will be filled by sometime in March. If anybody knows someone who wants to become an overworked legal secretary / paralegal, we'd love to receive their application. That position is currently posted. I swiped one of those 2 to become my executive assistant. So that's an opening that we have. We also have 4 part-time personnel who are extremely helpful to us. 3 of those are retirees. One is an intern from the criminal justice program up at Kennesaw who assists our criminal section, which does wondrous things, frankly. So we've had a pretty good year. I think we're productive. We've got a good spirit. We're making progress. And a part of that progress, as you may have intimated and you see when you look at what you have here before you, is a contingent upon approval by the legislature, administrative move of our agency from under the aegis of the governor to that of the Attorney General and the law department. That's a policy decision that made above my pay grade. My job is to run the agency, and I don't see that it'll change much if this administrative move comes about. Turning to the budget, I'm looking at page 61 of 101. I don't know where it would be in what you have there. Okay. There is a small increase, a series of small increases. One having to do with planning for employee retirement contributions, another insurance, and a third for merit pay increases. And as the last item there at 32.1.4 indicates, 65 positions and 2 vehicles are being transferred. Those 2 vehicles are on the road almost all the time. Our criminal investigation team has first use of those, and they cover a lot of ground. The 65 positions is a bit illusory, and let me explain why. That includes positions authorized but which have not been filled for a number of years because of two little entities that used to exist in our office that are still authorized but have not been funded since about 2002 or 3. One is the former Consumers Utility Council. The other was the Consumers Insurance Council. If that was, it was something like that. Those Consumers Insurance Advocate, CIA, we had our own CIA. So they count against that 65 total, but if we were to fill all the remaining positions, there would only be one or two beyond what we already have filled or plan to fill. So with that, I welcome any questions or comments that anyone may have. Well,
Looks like you did a great job.
it's like I bored you to tears, so I shall depart.
Thank you.
I do want to tell you one thing, though, if I may. Lincoln is one of my favorites, too. I come from originally very near Gettysburg, which he gave one of his major speeches there. My favorite Lincoln quote, especially given what I do now, is one that he gave to government contractors during the Civil War when a couple of them came to see him because they found out they were being investigated by the then new Secret Service for furnishing shoddy equipment. He said, "Gentlemen, you need to remember that when you deal with the government, you have to cut square corners." And I think that's a pretty good motto for those of us who do what we try to do in our agency as well. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Good day.
Next up is the Department of Insurance. Page 14, members.
Good morning. Mr. Sowers just talked about the consumer insurance advocate. For those of you, and I think all of you are here since this happened, that was an office created by Governor Barnes when John Oxendine got elected as the insurance commissioner. He created this consumer insurance advocate in this other to duplicate what the insurance department was supposed to do, to try to cut the legs out from under John Oxendine. So just a point of information. Good to be with you. For this next budget, the FY16 budget, I see that you're cutting $308,153 from the fire safety program at the Department of Insurance, which we are the Department of Insurance and Fire Safety. So that money, I'm gonna just beg you to replace that money. Don't take it. You cut $600,000 out of me last in the amended budget, and we can handle that because that program is gone, and we'll, if we think it's necessary, then we'll ask for a separate appropriations to fund that program. But this $300,000, we have 52 vehicles that are allotted for the total agency. That's fire safety and insurance. 24 of those vehicles exceed the state guidelines for replacement. So what I'd like to ask, and 11 of those vehicles are in fire safety, and they have over 200,000 miles on them. So we need to systematically replace those vehicles. And so I'm asking you to give me $200,000 of that $300,000 back for this systematic replacement of these vehicles. And then I'd like to ask you to give me another $100,000 back, which would be a total of $300,000. And if you want to give me all $308,153, that would be fantastic. But we use that money to inspect mobile homes that are being manufactured in the state of Georgia. And we right now have one new manufacturer that's coming online. And if we have to cut back because we don't have adequate funds to fund the inspectors, because every mobile home that's manufactured in Georgia has to be given a medallion by our inspectors. Now, our inspectors are working on a contract from the federal government because it's a federal government medallion that's put on these mobile homes before they can even leave the yard. And so if we don't have enough money to fund these inspectors, then these mobile homes, even though they're manufactured, they can't be put in the retail market and be sold in the state of Georgia. And with one new manufacturer coming online, you know, we about closed down all the manufacturers in the state of Georgia when we had the economic downturn. But now as the economy's coming back, these manufacturers are manufacturing, they're opening new lines in their manufacturing facility, plus we're having one new manufacturer that's coming into the state. And so we need this funding primarily to get us through from July 1st until February, when the federal government gives us, they reimburse us for the cost of manufacture, and they reimburse us a certain amount per medallion that we put on these mobile homes. And so as they're making more and we're applying these medallions, then the federal government is going to give us more reimbursement. But to get from July the 1st, which the fiscal year starts, the 16 or 17, whatever that budget is, the new budget starts July 1, to get to February, we need another $100,000 to be able to have enough money to carry over to fill this gap in. And so that's why I'm asking you if you could please consider not cutting us another 300. You know, we lost 600,000 out of the amended 15 budget, and we just can hardly stand to be cut another 300 out of this new budget. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Chairman Pruitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here today.
Yes,
I guess, I'll be honest with you, it's my fault. I wasn't paying close enough attention. But you've got 300, I don't know where I am now, 300,000, yeah, 308,000 in here. But you said something about vehicles. I don't see anything about vehicles, and then you said something about keeping the 308 so you could get vehicles?
Right.
But yet you've got it line item to something else that you need? I mean, take it away from something else that you had, I guess, already had.
Well, you're taking it from the housing, manufactured housing inspections.
Okay, I got that.
That's why these inspectors have to have vehicles. They have state vehicles, and these vehicles.
But you didn't put a requirement in here that you needed vehicles in your budget, did you? I mean,
in the budget request?
Yeah, there's nothing in here saying you needed vehicle.
No, I'm gonna let.
They're not, Chairman Pruitt, and when the budget was put together, it was a flat budget this year that was required to be submitted, and so there were no requests for
All right. So you just looked at flat numbers, but you just needed to move some monies around in order to get vehicles?
Well, no, sir. We actually needed to retain these funds to both operate the program. If you recall, we discussed it during the amended hearing, the cash flow issue.
Yes.
Part of it's a cash flow issue, the 100,000 part that the Commissioner discussed, the other 200 being an opportunity to systematically start replacing those aged vehicles in our fleet.
But if they hadn't cut this 308, that's where you were going to use that to get vehicles.
Correct.
Okay. And how many vehicles?
Well, we've got 11 that are over 200,000 miles that are just,
But we've got 24 that exceed the state guideline for replacement.
And this 100,000, because it being a cash flow issue, that means at the end of the year, you'll have that $100,000 left over. Is that not correct? And you're going to have to ask for this 100,000 every year? Because as we start a new year, every year you're going to have that 100,000?
this would enable us to reserve those funds and carry them forward to operate from July until February of next fiscal year, or the following fiscal year.
How are you able to do that? I mean, because you're supposed to turn in what you have left, are you not? How do you reserve it?
It's federal funds that we'd be reserving.
Oh, okay.
The cut is...
So it's a one-time thing, this $100,000
Yes,
to get you through the February?
That's correct.
We haven't had this problem in the past?
Not until we started cutting this program, no, sir.
Okay. In other words, just continue to cut funds, just put you in a cash flow situation? Okay.
Well, what created the problem was when, in the amended 15 budget, what's the budget that we...
This is 16.
The amended 15 budget.
Right. This is 16.
When you took $600,000, that took all our ability to have the reserves to fund this manufactured housing inspection program through till we get money for next February.
Okay.
We just got our money in, for last year.
In the other amended budget, we were talking about a cash flow problem, but it wasn't about mobile homes, was it?
Yes, it was.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking it was something else.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the members? You have a slim crowd of members right now.
Do what?
You have a slim crowd of members.
I know it.
All right, well, thank you, Mr.
ma'am.
Commissioner. And our last but certainly not least, the department of the day is the Department of Revenue with Commissioner Riley. We're on page 22, members.
Lynn, they're all yours.
Thank you very much.
Good morning,
Good
Madam Chair,
morning.
members of the committee. Pleasure to be here with you this morning, and I hope you're all off to a great start today. And I know you've got a busy schedule, so I'll be as brief as I possibly can. Our budget for FY16 has changes, but they're primarily only two. The rest of the changes are reflective of statewide changes across all agencies, and we are extremely grateful for some of the enhancements that we've been offered there. The two changes, the significant changes, are both reductions, and neither of those are problematic for us. The first one you'll see, line 41.6.5, under local government services, and this is a reduction of funds for payments of unclaimed property recovery services based on an updated payment methodology. There is legislation that is moving through the General Assembly at this time that will allow for us to effectively net out the fees that we pay to collection services that find unclaimed funds for us, so that we do not have to advance funds from the state to pay for the services provided.
Will you just briefly help them understand what that means? Help them understand what unclaimed property is.
I'm aware of all that, but it would be good, but I don't know where we are.
We're on page 23, 41.6.5. You with us, Tim? Okay.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief and explain it as best I can. Unclaimed property is found by outside service vendors that identify for the state of Georgia funds that do need to be remitted to the Treasury. When they do so, they do this service for a fee. Currently, we are having to expend funds to pay for those services in order to get those unclaimed funds into the state coffers. What we are asking for through legislation is to allow this to be netted out, so that any fee that is due to these collection services agencies can be just a reduction of the amount remitted to the state. That way we don't have to advance funds to get funds in the door. We'll just get the net proceeds that again go into the state treasury to be held in fiduciary until such time as someone asks for us to remit them back to them.
Thank you,
Chairman
Madam Chair. Thank you. Unclaimed properties being if somebody passes away and they had a life insurance or something and the company holds it and they can't find the recipient of it, so they send it to the state.
Correct.
And you're telling me that we have to pay to accept it?
In some cases, we aren't aware of this unclaimed property being out there,
Right.
so that there are services that will actually seek that information and provide it to us. Otherwise, we would have to expend our resources within the agency to go looking for this information.
So we actually pay somebody to find these things. I would thought by law they had to, and it was mandated they had to do it. We didn't have to ask for it to be done. I just thought everybody knew that if they couldn't find the person that it went to, it had to be given to the state as unclaimed properties. But we actually have to seek it out and try to locate it?
Well, I can't speak specifically to that. I do know that we found that it's been efficient to utilize collection service agencies that will identify that on our behalf. But I can do some follow-up checking to determine what the statute is as far as having folks that are holders of unclaimed property getting it back to us.
Okay, I was thinking by law they had to remit it, but...
We'll follow up on that and
Okay,
get that
thank you.
information back to you.
All right. And 41.7.2.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. 41.7.2 is a reduction in funds for the liability that the state is responsible for local tax officials' retirement benefits. The calculations that have been performed by the Office of Budget and Planning are actually coming in, well, the true amounts are actually lower than what were projected, so we can reduce the state's exposure by the amount that's shown here, which is $1.036 million for the FY16 budget. And those are the only two substantive changes for our agency for FY 2016.
Representative Dickey.
Thank you. Commissioner, what local tax officials do we have that obligation to state for? Is it, is it
Representative Dickey, I know that it's the tax commissioners. I'm not sure how much further it goes beyond just the tax commissioners.
okay, you don't know if it's the appraisals, the tax appraisal office and all that?
I will confirm that it's just the constitutional officers, the elected tax commissioners, but that is my understanding. But again, we'll confirm that information to be sure.
Okay.
We believe it's mainly the tax commissioners, but we will get you confirmation on that. But
Okay.
we believe it's just those positions.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman Pruitt.
I do have one more comment. I just miss you. She was my seatmate, and I really miss her, because anytime I had a question, I'm telling you, she was always on top of it.
She
And-
is.
Chairman Pruitt, I miss you as well, and just a text or a phone call away at any
All
time.
right, great, thanks.
All right. It looks like you have no more questions. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and we will follow up with that information.
And this adjourns the meeting.